The road to Battlefield 2042 2.0 is a slow and painful one. DICE's recent blog post shows off subtle map design updates that illustrate the smallest amount of progress. And this snail's pace of development is honestly baffling. And trying to wrap my head around what's going on at DICE only leads me to conclusions that don't show a bright future for this game. According to leaks, insider info, and frankly just following developer accounts on Twitter, it's clear that a massive portion of the dev team has moved on to different projects. And of course, this is not at all uncommon in the game industry. Your next project should be lined up and ready to go the second you start winding down production on the current project. However, if you have an inflexible production pipeline and your new game launches with tons of problems, and then your company moves forward with the plans to move its dev team onto the next project before fixing those problems, well then you're left with, well, Battlefield 2042, a game with a mountain of problems and what appears to be a skeleton crew working to fix them while also building the year one DLC content. And DICE's monthly development production blog posts are kindly worded community appreciation letters that take the smallest amount of information about progress and inflate them into full articles about map design and development plans. Cleverly written, they try to hide the fact that the progress being made is embarrassingly slow. And to be honest, the community isn't buying it. There's only so long you can string people along with the promise of good things before you have to start paying up. We're about 6 months post-launch, and DICE is showing production pictures of shipping containers and concrete barriers being added into only 2 of the game's current maps. Let's take a quick peek at DICE's latest blog post showing off some of the upcoming map changes. And of course, remember the last blog post from a month ago showed off some flags being moved around the Kaleidoscope map. And now a month later, we see some simple physical cover additions. The biggest changes are to the Kaleidoscope B1 sector, removing a gazebo and building out a mini base of concrete cover and shipping containers. And to be honest, it actually looks like it will solve a significant cover problem and maybe even add a more CQB infantry focused area to the map. The solutions and work being done here actually looks fine. I agree with it and have no problems with any of the proposed changes. But again, frankly, you could sneeze on a topographical map of Kaleidoscope and add cover wherever the snot landed and it would still be an improvement over the current design. Really, it's the rate at which progress is being made that honestly stuns me. Now, I'm not currently a game developer, but I do have some professional development experience working on games, and I regularly speak with people who are game developers. And with regards to the incredibly slow pace at which this game is coming along, the only possibilities that these industry professionals that I've been speaking to have been able to come up with is a lack of workforce and/or lack of qualified people working on the game, or that the Frostbite engine is extremely difficult to development, and most likely it's a combination of all of those factors. But the aspect that really leads me to believe that it's heavily weighted in the lack of workforce is the fact that the progress being made seems to be mostly sequential. Like right now, they only wanted map feedback and they're only really showing any progress on 2 different maps that they deem to be the most problematic, as opposed to working on all the maps simultaneously. And they haven't even begun the next feedback loop session for what they want to do with specialists. That's beginning with the next blog post, I assume next month. Now, it does sound like they have started to do some work with the specialist system behind closed doors, but why are we still waiting to hear about the proposed plans for them and to hear community feedback? It's a day or two's worth of discussion on how to proceed, and then you post the plans and see what people think. Again, we're 6 months past the launch of this game, and while I'll give DICE a break for holiday vacation and maybe a little bit of time for the shell shock of the public reception for the game to sink in, that still puts us what I would consider to be months behind schedule for having a solid plan for just moving forward with the game. I've already seen countless proposals by individuals in the community about how to rebalance the specialist system to better fit into the class system. These that I'm showing here are ideas that individuals have come up with, are illustrated clearly, and couldn't have taken them more than a day or two to do so. DICE could and probably should just copy and paste some of these ideas onto their development board and just go from there. The concept work has basically been crowdsourced for them already, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if that's what they had actually done and or are doing at the moment. But again, why are we still waiting to hear the official plan moving forward if that's the case? Many of these proposed changes are months old at this point, and some of the first ones that I remember seeing were things that people suggested within the first month after the game launched. If DICE continues to fix things one after the other with the long list of things that they have to fix in this game, well, we're going to be fixing 2042 well into the launch of the next title. There's just too many pressing issues to take such a slow, sequential pace, and I'm worried that as potential good content and maps start rolling out for this game over the Season 1, the pool of poorly balanced maps is going to make the average playing experience still mediocre, as you're going to be cycling through a few good maps, but mostly bad maps. They may even have to consider removing some of the lesser maps from the rotation while they work on them as more maps are added. Now, as laid out in this recent and the previous blog post, we're not going to see any of this new map changes added to the game until sometime in Season 1, which begins in the summer. So the earliest would be, I guess, around June 21st. But again, it doesn't sound like we're getting these map changes at the start of Season 1. Then beyond the proposed changes for Kaleidoscope and Renewal, the next map changes should come in Season 2, and so on and so forth. The blog also talks about reducing the amount of attack vehicles that can be brought into combat, and this should hopefully reduce the vehicle dominance on most map. This plus added infantry cover could make the infantry game overall feel a lot better, but it's still ignoring the game's massive lack of dedicated infantry modes, or even maps that just more cater to the infantry experience by limiting air and ground vehicles. Previous Battlefield games had tons of maps with aircraft disabled and limited helicopter support, but in 2042 every map has access that really reduces the variety of gameplay styles and experiences between maps. I'm sure it's great for pilots, but it's not particularly great for all the other playstyles. And it's hard to see how DICE might solve this problem unless they actually plan to start disabling entire vehicle classes altogether on certain maps. One of the other roadblocks that DICE seems to be running into, according to their blog post, is the maximum asset quantities. When DICE increased the player count up to 128 players with 2042, well, they created a very tight threshold for how many things that can be on a single map at once, which means DICE can't actually add in more transport vehicles that spawn at, say, flag locations, helping infantry get around the map quicker. And I guess technically they could, but according to them, it's going to greatly impact the already struggling performance metrics, so instead they're moving the capture points closer together and adding more cover to make the running around experience less painful for infantry. And like many fans out there, I would certainly love to believe in the future of this game. But what DICE is saying, or rather what they're not saying, inspires little confidence in the future of this title. Trickling out fixes for a game with a mountain of issues is going to result in a slow death for the title. Or actually a quick death for the title if you're following the player count numbers on Steam. Fixing Battlefield 2042 is going to require resources, which means DICE needs to make an investment in this game. And while the higher-ups might look at their spreadsheets and calculate the profit-loss ratio and deem it not worthwhile, it's really an investment in the future of the franchise and the company's image. Right now, it's hard for me to see the current situation of Battlefield 2042 support as much more than damage mitigation over the course of the already paid-for Year 1 content, likely followed by the swift abandonment of 2042 altogether after that Year 1 content is over. And again, I sincerely don't want that to be the case, but adding up all the clues and evidence, it seems like the most realistic outcome at this point. What do you guys think of this whole situation? Is DICE going to stick with this game for a long time and give it the needed love, support, and tune-ups and turn this whole ship around, turn 2042 into a good game? Or do you think they're more or less declaring 2042 as a lost cause and doing their best to quietly jump ship and just start working on the next more promising titles? Let me know in the comments. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap signing off.